the history of the Muslim community, we'd like to take this history back to the emancipation of the slaves. If I have my date correct, I think the emancipation of the slaves took place in the 1830s. Is that so now? Thank you. And they said that when the slaves were emancipated, they danced in the streets. And so that was the beginning of the coons. They never go further back than that. Today they don't call them coons anymore, they call them minstrels. I want to take you back to the years of the century before that. What happened amongst the Muslims prior to that? In the 1600s, the 1700s, and part of the 1800s. Were they dancing in the streets, strumming their banjos, jumping up and down, taking their daughters with them, taking their little children with them, and giving the impression that this is in fact the culture of the Muslims? Because the vast majority of the people taking part in these things are Muslims. You look at the names, you'll see mostly Muslim names. And so they trace us back, their own distortion of the history, they trace us back to the emancipation of the slaves. And can you see, it is at that time when they were emancipated and they started dancing in the streets, and they're still dancing in the streets. Our history. If you look at the 1600s, the 1700s, and part of the 1800s, you will see that those years were extremely rich in spirituality. And we had some of our greatest forefathers, extremely solid people, coming to the fore during those centuries. We all know, for example, Tuan Abdurahman, whose body is in Constance. Tuan Mahmud also in Constance. And there are two other auliya in Constance. I think there are four altogether there. That was in the 1700s. We know about Tuan Yusuf. He came here in the late 1600s. Came here at the age, I think, of 75. Was a very old man, in fact, when he came here. And did immense work here. And even one of the Christian historians, Thiel, mentioned the work that he did in bringing the people to Islam and in consolidating the Islam. Tuan Yusuf. He was a Mujahid, fought the Dutch in the East Indies. He was head of the Khalwati tariqa order, called the Khalwati order. He was the crown of that order. He wrote an enormous amount of books. He was deeply involved in Tasawwuf, and he was known not only here, but he was widely known in Indonesia. To such a degree that I think there's a university named after him, and there are studies of Tuan Guru at some of the universities. That's the degree to which he was known. He lies here. There's some dispute as to whether his body is here or not, but I don't believe that, because in my research I came across the fact that there was an application by his family that his body should be taken back to Indonesia, but the application was refused. And if that had to be done, it would have come down in our oral history, and it did not come down in our history. That his body was not there. So as far as I am concerned, his body is there. And when Sheikh Muhammad Jafar of Karachi was here, he told me, "I'm so pleased that you brought me to the grave of such a Sadiq man." Now if there was nobody in that grave, he would not have said those words. The same applies to Malela was there, Malela spoke to him there about looking after us here in Cape Town. And the others that I've taken, they've all admitted to the fact that he's there. That's one of the great figures they're talking about now, because they want to name a footbridge after him, is Tuan Guru. And I said one of the bridges that leading into Malela Boulevard is going to be named after him. His real name is Imam Abdullah. He was the son of Qadi Abdul Salam. He was not Qadi Abdul Salam as people say. Tuan Guru, Mr. Spiritual Guide. Tuan is a Mr. and Guru is a spiritual guide. And so he was very well known here. But he did a number of extremely important things in his time. He was, of course, not a member of the Koons or of the minstrels. Neither was Tuan Yusuf, neither Tuan Abdurahman or Tuan Mahmud or any of the other solid people buried on the lower slopes of the mountains around here. There are a number of them there, quite a number. That Tuan Guru, first of all, they say it's descended from newspaper reports from the Sultan of Morocco. I've never come across this. The first time I come across that fact. But I know that he wrote a book called Ma'rifatul Islam wal Iman, in which he outlines the teachings of Islam and Iman. So for the first time, the Muslims of the Cape here had a book that they could refer to when it came to the teachings of Islam. There were no Qur'ans here. So he wrote, I think, 2 Qur'ans from memory. The one is in the Job Street Mosque that he established, and the other one is for Sheikh Qasim Abdul. Of course, he established the madrasa there in Job Street and the mosque. And it's interesting that he taught mathematics and English and Dutch and fiqh and Quran and so on. He did not exclude the secular subjects from his school, because he knew that the people required secular skills if they wanted to make a living here at the Cape. This is a phenomenal man. And he's never mentioned. So in those years, and those centuries I'm talking about, the latter part of the 1600s, the 1700s, the first part of the 1800s, there were a lot of very solid people at the Cape. These people upheld the teachings of the Tasawwuf orders. Almost every order was found here at the end of the 1700s. One of the researchers there mentioned almost all the orders that you can think of, all here, including the Naqshbandis. And so our forefathers of those times, let me repeat, of the second part of the 1600s, of the 1700s, the first part of the 1800s, were known not for their minstrels or their koons. They were known for being intensive practitioners of Tasawwuf. Those people. And so many of them were Alawis, for example, they belonged to the Alawi tariqa. Tuan Guru was an Alawi. Some of them belonged to the Qadri tariqa. Some belonged to the Naqshbandi tariqa, like Tuan Yusuf. He belonged to the Naqshbandi tariqa. He also belonged to the Khawati tariqa. The Khawati tariqa, of course, is the tariqa that brought the 7 days and the 40 days and the 100 days to Cape Town. He comes out of that order. And he brought it here, plus a Maulid and Nabi. From him. Not jumping up and down in the streets. There's not a single record of him jumping up and down in the streets. All his records indicate that he was an intensely pious religious scholar of Islam. And all the records indicate Tuan Guru the same. And Tuan Saeed, whose body is also up there in, what's the place name? Lombok Street. He again, when he came off the island, Tuan Saeed, was called Tuan Saeed. When he came off the island, he was informed that the Muslim women in the slave lodges where they kept the slaves at night were raped there every night. Amazing thing. That's why one of the historians asked, why so many of the Malays, as they called them at the time, are so fair-skinned? The rapes. And those children who were born out of the rapes were taken into the Muslim community. Can't help you, some of you are not fair-skinned, that's your problem. It's not my problem, I'm brown. What had he to do? He decided to join the police force. Put on his helmet and his uniform, and he went to the slave lodges at night to protect the women from being raped. He became a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tuan Guru, all the things he did, he established a mosque and a madrasa, and he wrote, and he wrote 2 Qur'ans from memory, became a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tuan Yusuf came here under harsh conditions, lived under harsh conditions in Fori, became a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Made major contributions to the survival of Islam. I just want to quote one hadith here, I'll forget to quote it. Inna auliya min ibadi. Inna auliya min ibadi. Wa khibbai min khawki. Yudhkaruna bi dhikri wa adhkura bi dhikri. Oh no, that is right. It sounds right. No? Huh? Oh well, I'm sorry. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to Nabi Muhammad in the Holy Hadith. And he says, the auliya of my pious servants, and those my love of my creation, they are remembered by my remembrance. It is because Allah remembers them that we saw today talk of Tuan Yusuf, Tuan Guru, Tuan Saeed, Tuan Mahmud, and Tuan Abdurahman. Because part of the divine memory, these people. Wa uzkaru bi dhikri. Allah said, I am remembered. Allah said, I am remembered by their remembrance. Translation, right? And I am remembered by their remembrance. Now when I'm getting old, it's not okay to these things. Why is it that Islam survived during the Cape? Not because of the 101 reasons that historians give. It was because of the presence of auliya. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His name vibrated in their hearts. And they spread the message of Islam. They were our first da'is. Tuan Abdurahman, Tuan Mahmud, they were all our first da'is. In the Prince time, we are the only people following in their footsteps in this country by being da'is for Islam. I'm telling you this little bit of history because I want you to start understanding who your forefathers were and what they produced during the different historical periods. Some of the most pious people in this continent came out of this community. Some of the most Sarif people on this continent came out of this community. And they buried on the lower slopes of the mountains because they couldn't be buried in the normal cemeteries because they were not citizens. They were slaves or political exiles. So when you go past the grave of Tuan Guru, make dua there for him. Or Tuan Saeed, or Tuan Yusuf, or all the other Tuans. Tuan means Mr. One day somebody sent me a message, I don't know, I'm just giving the message that I received it. Tuan Yusuf tell Yusuf da Costa, you must stop calling me Tuan. I'm not a Tuan, I'm a Sheikh. So I try my best to remember that I'm saying Sheikh Yusuf, not Tuan Yusuf. Tuan means Mr. He doesn't want to be called Mr. He's a Sheikh in the tariqa all the time in Islam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin al-Fatiha.